You will taste the sweet pain of death. We will make beautiful music together.
What if the horrors of vampirism weren't just a monster story, but a mirror held up to the horrors of American racism? That's the brilliant, challenging question at the heart of Ryan Coogler's 2025 film, Sinners. The movie drops us into a supernatural horror story set in the all-too-real world of 1932, Jim Crow, Mississippi.
Sammy!
At its center are two black brothers, identical twins played by Michael B. Jordan, who are pushed toward opposite fates. One becomes a mortal hero, the other an immortal vampire. Their story isn't just a gothic horror tale, it's a deeply layered allegory. Today, we're breaking down how the opposing paths of these two brothers, Elijah Smoke Moore and Elias Stack Moore, reveal a terrible truth. We'll explore how the film uses their lives to create a powerful metaphor for the two-pronged assault of American racism, the soul-crushing demand to assimilate, and the monstrous alternative of being cast out completely. Through their story, Sinners seems to argue that under systemic oppression, this choice between assimilation and otherness is no choice at all. To get the impossible choice at the core of Sinners, let's start with the brother who stays human, Elijah Smoke Moore. On the surface, Smoke is the hero. He's the protector, the pragmatist, the one fighting to carve out a space for his people. He and his brother Stack are World War I vets who return to their hometown of Clarksdale, Mississippi. They use money they stole from Chicago mobs to build a juke joint, a would-be sanctuary for black joy and culture. Visually, the film codes smoke in shades of blue, which you could read as loyalty, restraint, and a connection to a higher path. But his heroism is complicated from the jump. This isn't a simple story of a good man building a good life. Smoke's path is paved with crime and violence, not because he's innately evil, but because the system of the Jim Crow South leaves him no other way to survive. The cash for their dream is stolen. They buy their land from a racist landowner named Hogwood, but only after threatening him with violence. Smoke's heroism is always a reaction, a constant, brutal pushback against a world designed to crush him. And this is where the film's critique of assimilation gets so sharp. Smoke's entire life is an attempt to work within a broken system to get some semblance of freedom. He's chasing economic independence with the juke joint, but the film subtly shows how this mirrors the very trap they're trying to escape. For example, the use of company scrip at their own joint is a clever, tragic nod to the real-world debt peonage of the sharecropping system, which kept countless black families in poverty. Smoke tries to build a bubble of black prosperity, but the rules of the racist world outside are always seeping in. His journey just reveals the deep exhaustion that comes with trying to assimilate. He has to be hyper-vigilant, constantly looking out for his impulsive brother Stack and their musician cousin, Sammy. His life is a performance of respectability built on a foundation of violence, a paradox forced on him by oppression. Even his ultimate fate is a devastating commentary. He gets a heroic death and is reunited with his family in the afterlife, which suggests that for the good black man who plays by the system's impossible rules, the only true freedom is literal death. His humanity allows him to grow and break the cycle of trauma, but only by leaving the world entirely. So if Smoke represents the struggle within the system, what about his brother? Elias Stack Moore represents the horror of being completely cast out. Coded in impulsive reds, Stack is the charmer, the smooth talker, the one who hates the restraint his brother is always preaching. His transformation into a vampire is the film's central metaphor. And it's not just a supernatural event, it's a social one. By becoming a vampire, Stack is turned into the monster that racist society always assumed he was anyway. He doesn't choose it. He's bitten and stripped of his humanity. But here's the tragic irony. As a monster, he gets a terrifying new power, and the one thing he was denied as a black man in 1930s Mississippi, the freedom to be with his white ex-girlfriend, Mary. Their love was impossible under Jim Crow, but in the damnation of undeath, they find a twisted kind of eternal reunion. This is where the film's analysis of racism gets incredibly nuanced. The head vampire, Remick, is an Irish immigrant, a member of a group that also faced historic oppression in America. It seems the film uses vampirism as an allegory for a specific, corrupting kind of assimilation. The temptation to shed your own identity, to get closer to the power of whiteness. By being turned, Stack is invited into a new hierarchy where he's no longer at the bottom. He's promised immortality and freedom from persecution, but it costs him his soul, his community, and his identity. Of course, this liberation is just a horrifying trap. His immortality is pure stagnation. While Smoke's death brings a final heavenly peace, Stack is condemned to an eternity frozen in his trauma. He's destined to haunt the world for decades, even visiting his elderly cousin Sammy in the 1990s as an ageless vampire. He accepts the vampire's peace, but it's a hollow, parasitic life. He gets the power he never had, but only by becoming a literal predator who feeds on the very community he came from. The film is practically screaming, what kind of freedom requires you to become a monster? The real tragedy here is that Smoke and Stack's paths, while seemingly opposite, are just two roads leading to the same dead end. They spring from the same source, the inherited trauma of a violent father and the systemic violence of a racist nation. Their identical faces are a constant visual reminder that they are two sides of the same coin. The film makes it painfully clear that neither brother finds real freedom. Smoke is suffocated by the demands of surviving inside the system, while Stack is damned for choosing to exist outside of it. Their conflict really is the central thesis of the movie. It's the pragmatist versus the escapist. Smoke chooses the grueling path of humanity, with all its pain and limits, hoping for moral growth and a legacy. Stack, on the other hand, takes what looks like the easy way out. He accepts the vampire's offer of a life free from persecution, an eternity with the woman he loves. But it's all a lie. His choice just perpetuates the cycle of violence, turning him into another tool of oppression. What Sinners seems to argue is that this is the ultimate cruelty of systemic racism. It gives its victims a set of impossible, predetermined choices that all lead to ruin. The system creates a world where the only options are to let your soul be slowly crushed while you fight for a scrap of dignity, or to abandon your soul completely for a monstrous kind of power. This isn't a simple story of good versus evil. It's an exploration of how an evil system can fracture the human spirit and turn brother against brother. Smoke's path leads to a literal mortal death. Stack's path leads to a social and spiritual death. In the end, both are consumed, one by the righteous fight, the other by a tempting surrender. So, what's the big takeaway from the vampire twins in Sinners? They reveal that the most insidious part of American racism is the creation of the false choice. The story of Smoke and Stack uses the language of horror to show that under systemic oppression, the paths of assimilation and otherness aren't roads to freedom. They're parallel tracks leading to different flavors of the same destruction. Smoke's mortal heroism is a slow, grinding death of the spirit. Stack's immortal monstrosity is a fast, violent death of the soul. The film uses its supernatural plot to light up a profound and devastating real-world truth. The most terrifying monsters aren't the creatures that lurk in the night. They're the oppressive systems that create them by forcing impossible choices on the people they want to destroy. It suggests the only true way to win is to break the cycle entirely, a task that might just demand the ultimate sacrifice. If you enjoyed this analysis and want more deep dives into horror, culture, and social commentary, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. What are your thoughts on Sinners and its themes? Let me know in the comments below.